GravityCast.
Hey everyone, welcome to World Building Wednesdays, episode 4. We're going to be talking about fantasy environments. Good to see everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. We're going to be taking a look at the Abyss that we started in episode 2 and start talking more about some of the fantasy environments that we're going to be dealing with for the board game. So where we left off on this, as you can see, we have some concept art that we started in episode 2, and I threw some of the references that I was looking at as I was developing this. Now, we originally talked about this, the Abyss of Sil Haldoon being Mayan influenced and using something that it's called a cenote, which is an underground cave, as a reference. So we're going to be taking a look at some of these and trying to mix a lot of these together and coming up with the final look of how this kind of ancient ruin is going to look. So if you're in the stream, say hello and I'll give you a shout out. Looks like Biku's saying hello. Red Fox, good to see you guys. So I'm Matt from GravityCast Games, and glad you guys can join me today. How's everybody's week going so far? Hey, there's Patrick. How's it going, Patrick? Biku asks how I'm doing. Yeah, I'm doing okay. Had a lot of play testing in the evenings this week. A lot of stuff going on, so pretty busy week. A lot of good progress on the board game. So what we have here is, like I said, some of these references that we brought in from the last time we looked at the Abyss. So here is a Mayan temple. So you can see from what we talked about last time that it kind of has that kind of stepped architecture feel to it. So I want to make sure that we kind of incorporate that into as much of this as we can, and also that kind of trapezoid shape. So I want to make sure that we can get that into the artwork as well. I also found some other interesting reference here. So here's another Mayan ruin that's on a cliff. So I thought that was kind of cool. This is an island that I'm dealing with here in this particular fantasy environment. So I thought maybe I should work some of that rocky cliff stuff into this as well. Thought that would be very interesting. And since it's on the coastline, I don't know what you guys would think about maybe having this, the Abyss there basically be a waterfall, like there's a giant waterfall that goes down into it. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on something like that since it's on the coast? And there's some more reference that I thought was kind of cool. Just kind of some circles cut out of stone, which is always very interesting. Squares and rectangles and those kind of things are easy to make. So if you're talking about like technology stuff, it's cool to work in some of these kind of more organic shapes. So Red Fox and Patrick think that the waterfall idea is kind of cool. Yeah, if you remember how we talked about this, how this might work. Turn off some of these layers here. That abyss would come down and there would maybe be some kind of spiral staircase that would go to the bottom. So, and I had some mountains and some things like that, but we could easily make this right on the coast instead, and maybe have some kind of waterfall. Maybe the water line is coming right up to this, and this kind of tapers off, and there's kind of water that pours down kind of down through the middle of it. Hey, there's Ashley. You made it. So I think that might be really cool to try something like this, where there's the spiral staircase that goes kind of around the sides of it, and there's this waterfall that's kind of spilling out through the middle. I think that's kind of very interesting. So I think maybe we'll try to give that a shot. So if you remember, here is kind of where we left off, where we had this kind of view that we were looking across this a little bit. So we can easily add some details here in the back, where maybe that we have something maybe that's a little more man-made here, because I kind of like that picture that's on the coast here. We have this kind of very organic kind of rocky coastline with some trees and bushes there, but then kind of out of the middle of nowhere you have this kind of man-made structure that's kind of popping up. I thought that was kind of very interesting. So maybe we can add some kind of element here that's kind of similar to that, where the water is kind of coming in through. And that would give us an opportunity to work some of those kind of like step designs, maybe in the side of this. And also thought, see if I can find the picture now, that this kind of shape here on this temple was very interesting, where the sides are actually stepped, but it has those kind of smoother ramps up there that go in a straight line. I thought that it was kind of an interesting way to deal with that. Those are actually human-sized steps, which would also give this kind of some scale. So we have the big steps here that go along the side, and then these little steps here, which is, you can actually see like these are people-sized things down here. So that's very small steps. So this is a very large building. So that helps give some scale too. So this is getting kind of sloppy here, me overlapping all of these things. So I'm going to go ahead and take my opacity down here on some of these layers. If we have any new viewers, go ahead and say hi. I see a couple more people popping in. Say hello in the chat so I know you're here and give you a shout out. What's everybody working on this week? Anybody doing anything fun or creative? So I'm just taking the opacity down on these layers a little bit, so I can use them as reference. Oh, Biku is starting a new project with a new tablet. What did you end up getting? And what are you thinking about making? Still going to keep this kind of rough here. Working on some branding stuff. That's cool. Some more character stuff. So I think one of the other things that I'm going to really try to work with here is perspective. So I'm not super happy with how my perspective is turning out on this, even for concept art. And the problem that I have is if I'm trying to convince people that this is very large, that right now I'm looking at this at the very wrong angle. So I might actually just leave this as reference and kind of start my drawing over a little bit more, because that will help build a sense of scale. Because right now, if this was the ground here, looking at it from the side, and this is the abyss going down, this current camera angle that we're working with here is kind of, person is up here looking down on it, so they're like a little person up here looking down on it. So if you were to be looking down on it in this way, it would appear probably very small. So especially like if there's the thing with the waterfall coming down here, you're going to get like a bird's eye view of this, which is going to make it look a lot smaller. So what I want to try to do to convey a sense of scale on this is move this down, and the lower that I actually make the camera, the more that they're actually looking up instead of down, the larger that this stuff is going to feel. Watched a very interesting thing on the Jurassic Park movies of how they actually didn't do ultra widescreen like they normally would, because they wanted you to see the height versus the width to show off the dinosaurs, because they used a lot of camera angles in there that were a lot lower, and they wanted to give you that sense of scale. So camera angles are very important to convey that information. So if I'm doing it like this and my perspective lines are going this way and the horizon is clear up here of where my eye is, then this is going to feel very small because I'm looking down on it. So what I need to do is bring that horizon line like way down here so it feels like this thing is a lot bigger. That's going to be a very interesting challenge here in order to make sure this looks like a hole in the ground, that I can look like there's some depth going down into it. So I'm going to go ahead and see what I can come up with here. So knowing that I want to keep my perspective lines down here of where my eye line is so I can see up higher on this. And remember, I'm just messing around here with perspective. This is still in the concept phase. I got some style references in that Mayan art. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a perspective line here. So here's my vanishing point reference. Whoop. I unhinged my drawing there. There we go. So I'm hoping that that's going to be good enough to get me some nice perspective lines here. And you can tell that my eye line is a lot lower to the ground here, which is actually good. That'll make this, the height of this, feel a little more massive. So I have my perspective vanishing point down here. which I might move over actually a little bit so it's not so close to the edge. And then I'll use these lines here as reference for how I'm going to do this. I'm going to probably do 2-point perspective here, but it's going to be very, very light on the other perspective, so I don't have to worry about it so much. So if I'm off a little bit, it's not going to be as noticeable. So I'm probably going to do a version of it like this just to see what some of the architecture looks like. And then I'll probably do another view of this because if I can do an above shot looking down on it, depending on what it looks like and what I put in the reference photos, I can also get a sense of scale as well. So here I'm kind of working on those trapezoid shapes in perspective. So I'm going to put some of the major steps in here as well. So Richie's asking me what card am I drawing. This is actually one of the fantasy environments. This is actually on the map. I can give you a quick reference here just for people that are interested. So let me pull this up here. So it will technically be on a card. It'll be on one of the adventure cards. Let's see if I can find it out of the whole bunch of things. I think it's actually in the wrong folder. Here we go. So here's actually the map of the island in the game. So we're working on the Abyss of Sil Haldoon right here. So this is going to be on one of the legendary adventure cards. So we're going to see like a little snapshot of what it looks like. And maybe a few other shots of it. So we'll see the kind of the cartoony, iconified version here on the map, and then we'll see a little more detailed version on the card. So I'm just kind of blocking this out right now to figure out exactly what this is going to look like on the card. Let's save a new version of this. Yeah, Richie helped me do a play test the other day, so thanks to Richie. So I'm just adding some of those step details here, and probably going to add that strip that goes through here that's kind of just straight line. Probably not going to fill in a ton of these details for this shot. Again, like I said, I'm just doing concept art to see kind of what I like for this. We'll have some of the water going out here. Is there anything else that you guys think would be interesting to see on this? Thinking maybe around the rim of this is where we can, if you remember, we talked about how a lot of the architecture had this kind of stepped look that's kind of at the bottom of this drawing here. I know it's kind of faded a little bit, where it had this kind of stepped box approach. I wonder if we can do something kind of around the rim that's something like that, at least at different parts, so we can kind of add a little bit of interest to this and kind of frame it off so it doesn't feel kind of as organic. Because remember, we kind of talked through this a little bit, and that this was made by some kind of giant civilization, and a lot of this stuff thought it would be interesting that, yeah, the giants kind of made this, but then there was a lot of man-made things that were kind of put around this, or to try to get down in there to see what it was about. So some of this stuff isn't necessarily as old, so we kind of have two different styles of building here. So that's where, like, maybe some of these things here for like the waterfall and all this stuff, and some of the blocks around the outside are these giant blocks, maybe that are as big as people. So like if I were to add a person here, that they would be, you know, about that big or so. And, you know, these would be huge blocks in comparison that are on the waterfall section here. Just move my camera around a little bit here just to make some more space. And I guess this doesn't have to be a perfect circle. Like if I were to look at this from the top, maybe we have the waterfall here. Maybe it does one of these kind of things where it's flat on one side where the waterfall goes down in, and maybe that's where like the coastline is or something. I think that might be kind of interesting. So kind of like this is almost kind of like a sheer cliff down here as you come around to it. Because if you take a look at this on the map itself, this is kind of right on the coastline here where I intended to put this. I mean, I know I have all the labels for these right on the coast, but I kind of intended it for it to be out here kind of by itself in the middle of nowhere. So I thought that would be interesting to have it kind of out on the coast like that, kind of almost like it's floating out there. And then, you know, there's the seawater that's kind of coming up to it. So it's almost like an enigma of how did this water fall basically happen here. It's just kind of coming up out of nowhere. So I'm just adding some more detail in here, kind of getting a feel for how this might turn out. I think it'd be a good opportunity to introduce some of the decorative stuff in here, possibly. I remember we talked a little bit about on the sidewall of this thing, how we could add in some decorative blocks and introduce some of that pattern into the world, that like fantasy paisley kind of look that with the swirlies that is kind of all over the place. So I think that might be interesting to work some of that in there as well. And that these kind of could be some of those steps that go up. So the little steps on the side are actually the human scale ones. So I would clear this out. So we leave those giant steps up there. That was definitely not a straight line. Oh, get too close to the edge there. So then these would kind of be the human scale steps in comparison to the giant not human scale steps. And you can see just by lowering that camera angle a little bit, it's starting to feel like this is a lot bigger instead of something that's just like a hole in the ground that's 20 feet across. And the more points of reference that we can get from a human standpoint, you know, like if I start to show some, you know, trees in the background, we have a relative scale for what we think trees are supposed to look like. So that would also help. Clean up some of these lines here. Yeah, remember Biku, we talked about this being all perspective lines. There you go. It's always the fun part. You can tell this is still pretty loose and fast. Nothing is real permanent at this point. I'm just kind of getting this sorted out a little bit. Just adding some vegetation things around here. Now I have to be careful about how much detail I do put into this because this is going to be on a very small card. So I need to still put enough detail that it looks big, but it's not so much detail that you're not going to be able to see it. Got the cliff here. I'm going to go ahead and add some water down here. So a good way to make sure that I'm doing this circle correctly is if we remember talking about perspective when we were dealing with the character drawing, is if I want to make a circle, I first need to make sure that I'm making a correct square. So if my vanishing point is here, so what I need to do is do something like this. So it looks kind of weird here, and I kind of got a little sloppy with it, but so to make sure that this is actually ending up being even remotely close in perspective, so I need to make sure that these lines go out here. So now I have basically a square. I cannot see the other point of this. It's off the screen over here somewhere to the right, but I can see 3 of the 4 points of this square that I've made in perspective. So I am just going to run the perspective line and cut this in half here, and then I'm going to run a perspective line this way. So I basically just took the square, divided it into 4, and then what I'm going to do is arc in between these. Now this back one's going to be very flat, and that's kind of the point. So that's basically how this would be in perspective, and I got a lot of overlapping lines here, so it's not looking super great. But this is going to be close enough for my concept stuff that I'm doing here. I would obviously clean this up a little bit better. So that's how I would get this in perspective, and generally be a circle here that is pretty close in perspective. But I think I still want to cut that corner off, so I'm going to grow that a little bit.
It was him. We'll never know what Dad was thinking that day. Maybe he was heeding the call of the wild.
So I'm just scaling that up a little bit, and see that it actually needs to cut off right here at the base. So none of that part of the circle is actually going to be in here. So I'm going to tone that down a little bit. I'm just going to really use that for reference. It looks like I was pretty close already, just kind of eyeballing it. So that's just for my own sanity to make sure. If you remember when I did the swords on the Mao Ragwan character, I thought those were close too until I actually did the perspective setup and they were way off. So never hurts to go back there and double check. I guess I might be in danger of this looking like some kind of ancient toilet bowl, so I might have to be careful how that looks here, especially with this cutoff in the circle here. So if it ends up looking kind of weird, I'll go a different direction with it and keep the general idea. Because I guess no one said this had to be a circle. That was just something that I came up with. So this could, if we wanted to make it more I guess man-made versus organic, this could easily also just be some kind of square as well. And it really wouldn't make any difference. It would be the same idea, right? So, I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think we should just go this square route to begin with? I mean, there are some interesting things that we can do with the circle. I mean, the staircase can remain, the idea can remain the same. It would just have corners instead. So let's say the stairs would be going down. It would just have a corner on it instead. Probably be like a bigger landing in each corner. So I mean, there's lots of things we can do. I just thought it was interesting to have the water kind of coming out here far enough that if you were taking these steps that you'd actually be walking in behind the water. So as this would go all the way around. Yeah, you're probably right there, Biku. Square is cool, but we got to be careful how close this gets to the cliff, because if we were to go kind of straight down with this, that would kind of go off the edge, and there's also got to be enough ground here to support what's going on. I know this is fantasy world too, but the engineering part of my brain says that, you know, I can't go too crazy with this. So I just have to make sure that this kind of makes sense. So that's where like this stuff is really fun to play around with. But if I get into serious vehicle design or environment design like this, where I kind of got an idea that I really like, that I'll probably end up going and doing some orthographic views of that, which means I'm going to be drawing without perspective to help give me a better layout of what's going on. So if we're going to go down that road, it might be a good opportunity to start looking into that kind of stuff to see, all right, well, how much space do I have to work with here? How far does the cliff go out? Like, what is that kind of stuff? So if I'm looking at this maybe from the top view, I don't mind having some organic shapes here from the top. Like this be out on a cliff here. I don't know how much space I'm going to have around this, but I don't have to make it square. I can kind of make it a little longer. So if this is the top view of the island here, so this would be the grass, this would be the cliffs going down into the water. Well, there would definitely be some other pieces of rock kind of popping up. Oh, I keep grabbing these extra things and moving them around. There we go. So then there'd be my waterfall coming down. We'd probably make some kind of border around this, and then probably some kind of walkway out here where maybe the staircase starts. And then it would just keep going down and down and down, and this is all kind of a dark area. Oh, I got my smoothing turned on. There we go. I was moving a little too fast for the pen. So something like that, that would give me kind of a sense of what this is going to look like from a top view.
Water?
Yeah, water.
So this would all be water out here.
Customer, so you'll have to order more than water. If you're broke, go somewhere else.
50 dumplings. Is it a deal?
Huh?
You feed me, and I'll take care of those guys for you.
So this just helps kind of give me also a lay of the land as well. got a little overzealous with my drawing and undocked the window again. So this is kind of a nice, really cool top view. Imagine there'll be some kind of path here. It might be cool to, on this approach, to add some kind of interesting things here that would kind of, like bigger structures that would kind of lean up to this. Looks like a Mayan complex. That's kind of the idea. Like square design, Red Fox. Yeah, does fit the Mayan motif. And typically, anytime you're dealing with the square versus round, it kind of gives it more of a sense of being man-made versus organic. So again, this is just kind of a top view for how this might look. And for I have a jillion layers here, I'm going to start naming these so I can go back and find them if I need to. So I do like the general idea of where this one's going. So I'm going to keep this top view that I just did as a reference. I'm going to go ahead and do a side view and probably a front view as well. That's just me. I'm going to be overkill on the orthographic views because I come from 3D world, so I'm trying to picture this in all different angles so I kind of know what it looks like. I mean, that definitely is overkill for what I'm doing and what's actually going to be visible on the card, but if I'm building a world, I want to know what it all looks like, just in case. And whatever I do here, this is obviously helping for the future of whatever else I'm going to be building that's similar to this as well. So if there's my ground line here, so here would be part that stands up. We had these really big steps in here, and then we had kind of the small steps that go down through the middle. My brush is a little too big there. So right here is actually the edge of the grass. And then it's going to come out to here on the cliff downward. So trying to figure out where a good line for the water would be. Kind of the higher this cliff is, I think probably the better chance that I have of making this work and not get too close to the edge. And there's going to be some other rocks kind of sticking out here, which I think would be cool. Remember, this is a view directly from the side. If you were to look at this directly from the side, not really dealing with perspective or anything like that, just kind of giving me a feel for what the layout of this object looks like. I would probably put some, again, working more of that trapezoid shape things in here, kind of like a section in the back that would just kind of help it stand up a little bit, which I don't have in my top view currently. But I think it might be interesting to add that in there. So if we were looking at that, it would be maybe like these kind of structures here. Something like that. So I'll leave my top view here, just to make sure I can kind of see it a little bit so I know what's going on. Got way too many lines, so I'm going to clean that up a little bit. I'm going to cheat a little bit and hold shift there. Not quite freehand, but hey. So it looks like it'll be out here somewhere, and I'm guessing, based at least on my last drawing that I did here, that about 2 steps down from the top is where the waterfall comes out of this. So somewhere in here, and it will kind of pour out and go kind of right in the middle. Alright, so there's a pretty good start. I want to make sure that I have those kind of blocks in here that have kind of that sawtooth pattern. Make sure that we're keeping that motif going. And then if you remember, we also added some of these structures out here. And I want to keep those kind of going on in the same way. I think I might move those out a little farther, to be honest. I want to give them a little more space. So I might keep that kind of same thing going here, where they're kind of stepped as well on the approach up to this thing. So if I was looking at that from the top view, then I would need to move those out a little more. Whoa. I definitely thought I had the other lasso tool on. That's better. Yeah, I think that could be very interesting. I think we can go with something like that. Alright, so that gives me a really good start on this for how this is going to turn out. So these orthographic views will help a lot fill in some of the gaps that I have in here. I'm going to try probably one more perspective sketch on this before we jump into the final art, just to make sure that I'm liking how this is going to turn out. So I like this angle here, and this is definitely way too close to the edge if I'm looking at my top view layout. So I would have to shrink this down a little bit, which is perfectly fine. I would definitely have to move this over a little more. Oops. So I would need to add a little more space behind here so it's not so close to the edge. So we'd have something like that then. So that now that we're zooming out, you can see that we're losing a lot of the scale going on here. So it's going to be hard to capture everything that needs to go into this particular shot. So I'm not trying to get too hung up on that because there's no way that we're going to be able to fit in the whole scene here on the card and get perspective and especially human scale in this. Because one of the big things about this particular art style, especially on the environments, is I do want to show a lot of scale because there's going to be a lot of really huge things in the world. So I want to make sure that we can convey that pretty easily. Yeah, so there, I think, gives us a really good example for us to look at. I go grabbing the window again. Too close to the edge. Biku's asking, what is the background music? This is actually a lo-fi hip-hop version of the Chrono Trigger soundtrack that I found. Pretty cool. I can post a link to that in the Discord channel so you guys can have a look at that if you want. All right. Yeah, Chrono Trigger had a really good soundtrack, so I think this was a pretty good mix. All right, I'm going to try one more perspective angle here. See if we can't get some. This is going to be a quick one here because I know we're getting kind of close to the end, so I want to make sure that we get a big chunk of the concept work for this done, so next time we can go right into the drawing and inking on this one. And I was thinking potentially about upcoming episodes. We can talk about that next time, but I was thinking that I have to design a cart for this game. So some of you that have seen the game or played the game know that it's about fantasy food service. You have a tavern, you also have a wagon where you serve soup off of. So I wanted the characters to have really, really interesting wagons that they would take around and put this stew on. So it's going to be very intricate, and they're pulled by these giant dinosaur chicken type things called terrapins. Think of it like dinosaur chocobos if you want. So I wanted to make sure that those wagons got a really special treatment because they were a very big part of the world. So and I really like vehicle design as well. So I'm probably going to put a lot of effort into those. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys want to take a look at on this as well. I don't know if I'm going to love this angle here because I'm going to miss a lot of the perspective. So we'll see if I can get a really interesting angle of this. I'm probably just going to try to duplicate this. See if I can kind of change the perspective a little bit on this picture. To get kind of an interesting view that I can probably put on the card. So I don't necessarily need to show that this is right on the coast in this particular picture. Speaking of Dino Chocobos, here's the dinosaur theme from Chrono Trigger. So I'm thinking if I can kind of zoom into this particular spot, we would get a lot of the stuff there. You would kind of see the cliff a little bit. You would see some of the sky. You would get to see some of this, and I would probably put something else in here to give you a little more human scale to this. And I'm thinking that I might even squish this perspective a little more so everything feels a little flatter, so basically your eye level is a little closer to the ground. So I want to make sure that I can show that there are stairs in here as well, which may be kind of difficult on this particular angle. Oh, and skeletons, yeah, that's a good way to add human scale. It would be very small here, though. That's the only thing that I'm thinking of. It's kind of hard to get a big picture of how large this thing is, but then also show enough of the environment to get all the big picture, and then see all the little stuff too. So I'm trying to find a balance of how this is probably going to look. I'm thinking that, to me, like having the steps on the front is not really working for me because you can't see. Red Fox is asking, what about buildings? What kind of buildings do you mean? Just like buildings around, so you can see like doorways? random Choco Dino skulls. Well, if we make giant skeletons, we'll throw off the scale unless we have some other point of reference. I'm thinking that these walkways here will help. Kind of what I started to do on that other one. Maybe that the staircases are actually, like these actually go all the way down. So you actually go on the side. This is steps, kind of. Some human homes are a camp, something visible in the distance. Yeah. The human homes and camp is going to be a tough one. Yeah, or like a lighthouse. So that kind of is getting into the territory of what is the level of technology that we're dealing with, which I haven't really got into a lot of that for the human-ish type people that are in here, like where is their level of technology. That's kind of where I'm going to get into with when we design the city of Agaro, which is like a port city. So I'll kind of kick that around a little bit, I think, to see how we can kind of incorporate that. I don't, at this point, I don't mind having these staircases kind of go down and have some kind of spiral that goes around the outside. Then they're kind of mirrored staircases that you can go take either side down. I think even behind this, I think I'd like to do something interesting maybe with, what would you guys think about making this thing kind of almost hollow? So you can kind of see the sky through the back. So it's almost kind of this like floating waterfall or something. Yeah, that would make crazy rainbows, I would imagine. Ashley seems to like this idea. Yeah, I think it seems kind of unique. We can go for it, give it a shot. So just so you guys can see a basic visualization of how that might look. I'll just throw some color on here. Not really sure what color stone I'm going to do on this yet. I haven't really thought through it that much. But whatever I do, I'm probably going to have to keep it consistent with other places on the map. If you remember, we talked about having the Silverian ruins. So like that's probably going to have the same brick color as this. So get a little bit of grass on that side, not much. Ironically, I have not made water yet in this world, so really didn't know what color I was going to choose for that. So obviously I'm just kind of messing around here to get some So Biku is asking a question, what level of technology will be reflected in however the waterfall functions? As far as what, like, does it serve kind of a purpose, or so right now, like, it's kind of an enigma of like how does the waterfall even work to begin with. I don't know if I'm going to explain that a whole lot, to be honest. I kind of want to keep that, you know, unless I have to build that part of the world. Yeah, how does the water get pumped in? Yeah, I think that's one of those things, like, I want to keep some of these things like a mystery a little bit on purpose, because when you see them, you're like, how the heck does that even work? And that's actually okay. It doesn't always have to make sense. So there's me just messing around, I guess, with some colors and whatever. I mean, obviously I'm not doing a great job of doing shadows and everything, but so I think that's probably as close as we're going to get here today on this. At least that gives me some more stuff to work with, and we have our different perspective views and things that we're going to work with. So just kind of give you guys a preview of some things here of what I was talking about for upcoming stuff. And what I had in mind is I already had done some concept art. Well, here's the one thing that you can take a look at. There is the... Whoop. Uh-oh, moving everything around. There is the Terrakin. What is going on? I can't scroll for some reason. That was weird. Yeah, it keeps wanting to jump over. It's kind of strange. There we go. Yeah, so there's the dinosaur chicken guy that I was talking about. Kind of zoomed in kind of far, but... And then also, which I kind of just have as a concept right now, if I can find it. I'm not even sure it'll be in here. Just because I brought them up as reference. Yeah, there's the cart concept that I had done so far. It's just a sketch and that I colored in really quickly. Where you'll put the stew in the back here, and you'll put your loot and wounded heroes on the wagon. So kind of old school Dragon Quest style stuff. So yeah, that's kind of some of the stuff that we'll probably deal with here in the future. We could talk through all that stuff and figure out what to do. So a lot of ground to cover, obviously, but you guys will help steer the direction of this and what you guys want to see. So with that, I appreciate you guys stopping by and checking out what we're doing, giving your feedback, and helping build some of these really cool things that we're going to make into the board game. So like I said, I'll drop some of those links that I was talking about in the Discord channel. So if you want to check that music out, I have a couple that I will probably be playing, so I'll post a couple of those links in there. So again, thanks for stopping by. Appreciate everyone. And we're building this world. We're really doing it. Thanks, guys.